At my wife's ultrasound, I was buzzing with excitement to finally see our baby. But the nurse's face was a mask of silent horror. She ran out of the room crying, and when I followed her, she told me a secret so devastating, so monstrous, that I never went home again. Before we get into it, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? And be sure to subscribe for our daily stories. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of the lie. The last 5 years of my marriage to Isabel had been a quiet, heartbreaking education in the language of loss. We were the perfect couple, the ones all our friends envied, but behind the closed doors of our beautiful silent home, we were fighting a losing battle with infertility. It was a war of 1,000 small defeats, the negative pregnancy tests, the hushed, clinical conversations with doctors, the sad, pitying looks from family members at every holiday gathering. The struggle had worn us down, frayed the edges of our once perfect love. I had been ready to give up, to accept our fate, to find other ways to build a family. But Isabel, she could not. Her desire for a child, for the perfect family she had always dreamed of, was a fierce and all-consuming fire. And then 6 months ago, the miracle had happened. I came home from work to find her sitting at the kitchen table, her face a beautiful, tear-streaked ruin of pure, unadulterated joy. She had held up a positive pregnancy test, and the years of quiet, gray sadness had been instantly and completely washed away by a tidal wave of brilliant, dazzling color. We were going to be parents. Our life, I believed, was finally complete. The months that followed were the happiest of my entire life. The distance between us, the one that had been carved out by years of disappointment, vanished. Isabel was radiant, glowing, the very picture of a perfect, expectant mother. And I was reborn. I was no longer just a husband, I was a father-to-be. I spent my evenings assembling a crib, my nights reading parenting books aloud to her round, swelling belly. I spoke to my unborn child. I told him stories. I sang him songs. My love for this tiny, unseen person was a thing of profound and powerful and absolute certainty. Isabel's pregnancy was, she told me, considered extremely high risk by her specialist, a man named Dr. Bennett. It made sense, given our history. And because of this, she was fiercely and understandably protective. Dr. Bennett says I need to avoid all stress, my love, she would tell me, her hand resting on my own. He thinks it's better if you don't come to these early routine appointments, just in case there's bad news. I couldn't bear to see your face if something went wrong. Let me be the one to carry the worry. I need to protect you. And I, wanting to be the perfect, supportive husband, had agreed. I had let her go to those appointments alone, trusting her doctor, believing her quiet, protective strength was just another facet of her love for me and for our child. Today was the day that all was supposed to change. Today was the big one, the 20-week anatomy scan. The day I would finally be allowed to come with her. The day I would finally see my son or my daughter for the very first time. I held my wife's hand as we walked into the specialist's polished, modern office, my own heart a thrumming, joyful drum in my chest. Today was the day our dream would finally become a reality, a grainy, beautiful, and miraculous black and white image on a screen. I was a man walking on air, a man on the very precipice of a perfect new life. I was completely, blissfully, and foolishly unaware that I was not walking into a doctor's appointment. I was walking into an execution. The execution of my marriage, of my future, and of the man I had once been. I walked into the ultrasound room, my hand held tightly in my wife Isabel's, a sense of profound and deeply sacred reverence washing over me. This felt like a holy place. The room was dimly lit, the air cool and quiet, the only sound the soft electronic hum of the high-tech ultrasound machine. On the far wall was the large, dark screen, a blank slate upon which the miracle of my child's life was about to be revealed. After 5 long, barren years of hoping and praying and failing, we had finally arrived. Dr. Bennett, Isabel's specialist, greeted us with a warm, reassuring smile. "Gabriel, a pleasure to finally meet you in person," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Isabel has told me so much about you. You have a very excited father-to-be on your hands," he said to her. "You have no idea," I laughed, my own voice a little shaky with emotion. A young nurse was in the room as well, a woman named Clara. She was preparing the equipment,
her movements a little too stiff, a little too precise. She gave me a small, fleeting smile that did not quite reach her eyes. I just assumed she was new or perhaps just having a bad day. I was too consumed by my own joy to give it a second thought. Isabel lay back on the examination table, and I sat in the chair beside her, my eyes fixed on the dark, empty screen, my heart pounding with a happy, frantic anticipation. The nurse, Clara, applied the cold gel to my wife's round, perfect belly. And then Dr. Bennett began the scan. He was a master, a true professional. He kept the main monitor angled towards himself and the nurse, away from our eager eyes. He moved the ultrasound wand over Isabel's belly with a practiced, gentle grace, a running commentary of beautiful, perfect lies flowing from his lips. "Ah, and there we are," he said, his voice a warm, confident purr. "A beautiful, strong heartbeat, a perfect 140 beats per minute." He chuckled. "And the little one is very active today. Look at that, Clara, a real acrobat in there. All the growth markers are exactly where they should be. Everything," he said, looking at us with a beaming smile, "looks absolutely perfect." I squeezed my wife's hand, my own eyes now blurry with tears of pure, unadulterated joy. A strong heartbeat, an acrobat, my child. But as the doctor continued his cheerful, empty narration, a strange, cold feeling began to creep up my spine. It was the nurse, Clara. She was standing beside the doctor, her eyes fixed on the screen he was watching, and her face was a mask of a quiet and deeply unsettling horror. Her skin was pale, almost gray under the harsh clinical lights. A thin sheen of sweat had broken out on her forehead. Her hands, I noticed, were trembling. She would not, could not look at us. She just kept staring at the screen, a screen that was supposed to be showing a miracle, with the wide, terrified eyes of someone who was witnessing a ghost. My own joy began to curdle, replaced by a new cold knot of anxiety. What was she seeing? Why did she look like that? "Doctor," I began, my voice a little tight. Is everything really okay? The nurse, she looks—" Before I could finish, Isabel squeezed my hand, a sharp warning pressure. "Don't be silly, my love," she said, her own voice a little too bright. "She's probably just new. We're fine. The baby is fine. Right, doctor?" "Absolutely perfect," Dr. Bennett said smoothly, not missing a beat.
But I couldn't shake it. The look on that nurse's face. It was not the look of a nervous new employee. It was a look of profound and deeply felt moral distress. "So," I said, forcing a cheerful tone back into my own voice, trying to push the cold feeling away. "The big question, the one we've been waiting for. Can you tell if it's a boy or a girl?" Dr. Bennett chuckled, a warm fatherly sound. "Let's take a look, shall we?" he said, pretending to look closely at the screen. "Well, it looks like, yes, there it is, no doubt about it. Congratulations, you two. You are having a healthy and very active baby boy." A son. I was having a son. The joy, the pure, absolute joy of it was so overwhelming, it almost lifted me out of my chair. And it was in that exact moment of my purest joy that the nurse, Clara, finally and completely broke. She made a small, choked, sobbing sound, and then she dropped the metal instrument she was holding. It clattered, loud and obscene, on the tiled floor. "Excuse me," she stammered, her face as white as a sheet, her eyes full of a wild, panicked terror. I'm sorry, I need to get some air." And then, before any of us could react, she turned and she fled from the room, her hand clamped over her mouth, a single, heartbroken sob echoing in the hallway behind her. I just stared at the empty doorway. My own heart, now a frantic, terrified drum in my chest. "What's wrong with her?" I asked, turning to the doctor. "What is going on? Is something wrong with my son?" "She's just a new nurse. Very emotional," Dr. Bennett said smoothly, his own smile never wavering. "Don't you worry about a thing, Gabriel. As I said, everything is absolutely perfect." But I looked at his smiling, confident face. I looked at my wife's own, too perfect and now slightly strained smile. And then I thought of the look of pure, abject horror on that nurse's face. She hadn't looked emotional. She had looked like she had just seen a ghost. My own paternal joy, which had been a brilliant, shining sun just moments before, had been completely eclipsed by a new and deeply unsettling cloud of doubt. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I'm going to get some water, I stammered, standing up from my chair. And I'll check on that poor nurse, make sure she's okay. Don't be silly, darling, my wife Isabel said from the table, her voice a little too sharp. She's fine. Stay here with me. But for the first time in our marriage, I didn't listen. I walked out of that room, my heart pounding a slow, heavy, and fearful rhythm, a man on a desperate and unwilling search for a truth I was not sure I wanted to find. I found her, at the far end of the deserted hospital corridor, huddled in a small, empty waiting area, her body shaking with quiet, suppressed sobs. The nurse, Clara. She looked up as I approached, her eyes wide with a new, fresh wave of panic. Please, you can't be here. Dr. Bennett will fire me. He'll ruin me. Please, just go back to your wife. No, I said, my own voice a low, pleading thing. I sat down in the chair opposite her. Tell us the truth. I am begging you, as a father. Is my son, is he sick? Is he dying? Is that what you saw on the screen? Please, my own voice broke. Just tell me the truth. I can handle it. She just stared at me, and her own face, which had been a mask of fear, seemed to crumble into a look of profound and deeply moving pity. She looked at my hopeful, terrified face, the face of a man who was so desperate to be a father, and she knew she could not be a part of the lie any longer.
"You are a good man," she whispered, tears now streaming down her own cheeks. "You don't deserve this, any of this." She took a deep, shuddering breath, the breath of a person about to detonate a bomb. "You're right," she sobbed. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be a part of it." She looked me directly in the eye, her own gaze a mixture of pity and shame and a strange new strength. And she delivered the words from the thumbnail, the words that would take my entire, beautiful, perfect life and burn it to the ground. "I can't hide this from you anymore," she wept. "There is no baby, Mr. Miller. There never was. The ultrasound screen, it was blank. Your wife, she's not pregnant. Her womb," she said, the words a final devastating blow, "is empty." The world went silent. The words were just noise, a nonsensical, impossible string of sounds that my brain refused to process. What are you talking about?" I whispered, a strange, hollow laugh escaping my lips. "Of course she's pregnant. I've seen her belly grow. We've felt the baby kick at night. I talk to him every single evening." The nurse just shook her head, her own face a picture of pure, heartbreaking sorrow. "The belly, it's a prosthetic, Mr. Miller, a very expensive, very realistic one. And the kicking, it's just her own muscles. Dr. Bennett, he's been faking the medical records for months. He's been taking her money. It's all a lie. I am so, so sorry." And in that moment, the entire, beautiful and meticulously constructed world I had been living in for the past 6 months simply and completely dissolved into a monstrous, elaborate, and deeply, deeply cruel work of fiction. The miracle pregnancy, the glowing, happy wife, the doting, perfect husband-to-be, the son I had already named, the son I already loved with every fiber of my being. He was not a ghost. He was worse. He was an idea, a lie. He had never even existed. The truth was a gaping black and all-consuming hole that had just opened up beneath me. My son was not real. My marriage was a fraud. And as I looked at the nurse's weeping, terrified face, a new and even more horrifying question began to form in the shattered wreckage of my mind. If there was no baby, then what was the point of all of this? Where in God's name was my wife planning on getting one from? I turned and began to walk back to that room. I was no longer an excited, expectant father. I was a man walking into a confrontation with a stranger, a monster who'd been living in my house, sleeping in my bed, and playing with my heart. I walked into the ultrasound room without a sound. They were still there. Dr. Bennett was standing by the machine, a look of professional, if slightly strained, calm on his face. And Isabel, my Isabel, was sitting up on the examination table, a look of impatient annoyance on her beautiful, treacherous face. "Gabriel, darling, there you are. I was getting worried. Is that poor emotional nurse okay? Honestly, they shouldn't let someone so unstable work in a maternity ward." I just looked at her perfect, lying face, at her round, prosthetic belly. And the love I had felt for her, so profound and so absolute just an hour before, was now a dead, cold, and empty thing. "The ultrasound, doctor," I said, my voice a quiet, dead thing that did not sound like my own. "Turn the screen. I want to see my son."
Dr. Bennett's professional smile faltered. A flicker of pure animal panic flashed in his eyes before he could suppress it. "Well, Gabriel," he began, his voice a smooth, practiced river of lies, "that's not really standard procedure. The angle of the probe isn't ideal for a clear parental view right now. And turn," I said, my voice now a low, dangerous growl, cutting him off, "the screen around now." He looked at Isabel, a silent, desperate plea for help, but her own face was now a mask of dawning, horrified terror. She knew the game was over. With a trembling hand, Dr. Bennett slowly, reluctantly swiveled the large, dark monitor around to face me, and I finally saw what the nurse had seen. I saw the truth. It was a blank, black, and empty void. A perfect high-resolution image of absolutely nothing. Isabel saw that the game was up. Her perfect, charming facade did not just crack, it shattered, and she began to weep. But her tears were not the tears of remorse. They were the hot, angry, and deeply pathetic tears of a thwarted narcissist who had just been caught. I looked at her, at this strange, monstrous woman who had been my wife, and I asked her the question. "If there is no baby, Isabel," I said, my voice a quiet, dead whisper, "if this has all been a lie, then what was the plan? Where in God's name were you going to get a child from?" And then she told me. She confessed the entire, horrifying, and unforgivable plan. She told me about her infertility, a truth she had kept from me. She told me of her shame, of her obsession with creating the perfect family that our life was supposed to be. She told me about bribing Dr. Bennett to create the fake medical records, to sustain the lie. And then she told me the final, most monstrous part of all. She had been using our life savings, the money I thought was for our future, to make a deal with an illegal online adoption broker. She had arranged to buy a newborn baby, a baby from a desperate, impoverished young woman in another state. The plan was for her to stage a sudden, premature birth while I was away on a business trip that had been scheduled for the following week. She was going to return home with a purchased child, a human being she had bought like a new piece of furniture, and she was going to pass him off as our son. I listened to her story, and the last of my own shock was burned away by a clean, cold, and righteous rage. This was not a woman who was desperate for a child. This was a woman who was desperate for an accessory. I looked at her, at her weeping, pathetic, and utterly broken form, and I delivered the final and most honest words of our entire marriage. For me, our love was enough, I said, my voice shaking with a grief and a fury so profound it was a physical pain. Of course, I wanted to grow our family, but it could have been in other ways. We could have adopted a child legally, together, but I never, ever imagined that your obsession with a perfect family would lead you to commit a crime like this, to buy a human being. I then turned to the corrupt, terrified man who was still trying to hide behind his doctor's coat, and I turned to the brave and wonderful nurse, Clara, who was now standing, a silent, powerful witness in the doorway. "Nurse," I said, my voice now full of a new, cold, and absolute purpose, "will you please call the police? It seems a crime, a very serious crime, has been committed here."
I walked out of that hospital, away from the wreckage of my marriage and into the bright, indifferent sunlight of a world that no longer made sense. The man who had walked in that morning, a happy, expectant father-to-be, was gone forever. I did not go home. I couldn't. The house, with its perfectly decorated and perfectly empty nursery, was not a home anymore. It was a crime scene, a monument to a monstrous and beautiful lie. I went to my brother's small apartment, a ghost on his doorstep, and for the first time since that terrible moment in the ultrasound room, I finally, completely broke. The legal process was a swift and brutal affair. The case of the phantom pregnancy became a sensation in our city, a lurid, tragic, and deeply pathetic story that the local news feasted upon for weeks. My wife, Isabel, and her co-conspirator, Dr. Bennett, were charged with a litany of crimes: conspiracy to commit fraud, trafficking, and a dozen lesser charges. Their defense was a weak, desperate attempt to paint Isabel as a mentally unstable woman, a victim of her own profound desire for a child. But the evidence of their cold, calculated, and financially motivated plan was too overwhelming. They were both convicted. Dr. Bennett lost his medical license and was sentenced to prison, and Isabel, the woman I had once loved, was sent to a secure psychiatric facility. But through all the noise of the legal battles and the screaming headlines, my own heart was focused on only one thing: the baby. Rosie, the little girl who had been the unknowing prize in her mother's terrible game. I learned her full story from the social worker, Miss Gable. Her biological mother was a desperate, impoverished teenager from another state who had been coerced into the illegal adoption ring. With the ring now dismantled, the young mother had been found and offered support, and in a final, heartbreaking act of love, she had made the decision to place her daughter for legal, ethical adoption, wanting her to have a life of stability and love that she knew she could not provide. And so my own quiet personal battle began. The world saw me as a victim, a heartbroken and deeply wronged man. But I saw myself as something else. I was the only person left in this story who could give this little girl a home. The adoption process was long and arduous. It was a year of interviews, of background checks, of a system that was designed to test the very limits of my resolve. But I was not alone in my fight. The brave nurse from that fateful day, Clara, had become my staunchest ally, my best friend. She was there for every court date, for every meeting with the social workers. She was the one who reminded me to eat, to sleep, to not lose hope. And she was the one who, with her quiet, steady strength, began to slowly and carefully piece my own shattered heart back together. It has been 2 years now. I am sitting on a blanket in a sun-drenched park. The air is filled with the happy, joyful shrieks of a child on a swing. My son, the son I thought I had lost, the son who had never been, has been replaced by a beautiful, vibrant, and very real little girl with wild dark hair and striking light green eyes.
My daughter. My Rosie. The adoption was finalized 6 months ago. We live in a small new house, in a new city, a place with no ghosts and no bad memories. Our life is a beautiful, chaotic, and deeply happy mess of scraped knees, of bedtime stories, of finger painting on the kitchen walls.
A few minutes ago, Clara, the woman I now love, the woman who was now my partner in this new, beautiful life, called from the playground. "Dinner is ready," she had said, her voice full of a warm, easy love that I had once thought was lost to me forever. I look at my daughter, at her joyful, smiling face, and I think about the impossible, heartbreaking journey that brought her to me. I had walked into that hospital a man who was about to be given a lie, and I had walked out with the promise of a truth that was more beautiful than any I could have ever imagined. My perfect family had been a fiction, but this messy, real, and profoundly loving family I had built from the ashes of that lie, this was the truest story of all. An absolutely unbelievable story of betrayal and the beautiful, unexpected family that was born from the ashes of a terrible lie. What an incredible journey for Gabriel. What do you think of the nurse, Clara's, role in this story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this powerful story of healing and a new beginning, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more incredible and emotional stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.